these watchers are teaching humanity civilization. They're culture bringers. Let me read a little bit of chapter 7, and then I'll ask you a question.
Sure.
So they took wives unto themselves, and everyone respectively chose one woman for himself, and they began to go into them, and they taught them magical medicine, incantations, the cutting of roots, and taught them about plants. Now, then it has a little bit of a sidelight, and we'll come back to this in a minute. And the women became pregnant and gave birth to great giants, whose height was 300 cubits. These giants consumed the produce of all the people until the people detested feeding them. So the giants turned against the people in order to eat them.
Well, that sounds something familiar.
And they began to sin against birds, wild beasts, reptiles, and fish.
Interesting.
And their flesh was devoured by one another, and they drank blood. And then the earth brought an accusation against the oppressors. And then it says, and so that was just very short, chapter 7, now chapter 8. And Azazel taught the people the art of making swords and knives and shields and breastplates. And he showed to their chosen ones bracelets, decorations, shadowing of the eyes with antimony, ornamentation, the beautifying of the eyelids, all kinds of precious stones, all coloring of tinctures and alchemy. And there are many wicked ones, and they committed adultery and erred, and all their conduct became corrupt. Amasrus taught incantation and the cutting of roots. Armoros, the resolving of incantations. Barachiel, astrology. Kokariel, knowledge of the signs. Tamael taught the seeing of the stars. Azdarel taught the course of the moon, as well as the deception of man, and the people cried, and their voice reached up to heaven. So here you have, there's two main things, right? You've got the whole giant thing and them eating and stuff like that. But then you have bookending that, you have that these watchers are teaching humanity civilization. They're culture bringers. They're teaching us
technology,
war, technology, science, medicine, astronomy, astrology. What do you make of that?
What's interesting is that there you do see in periods of time in history where there's like these massive jumps in like advancement in culture. And this, what
like the last 200 years?
Yeah, we can get into that. That's real fringy. But no, I think that the concept of a sword is not needed, or a weapon is not needed up until this point. So why why are we introducing swords? And yeah, I think there's I tell you this. Have you seen, there's an episode, I should talk to you about this ahead of time. There's an episode on Ancient Aliens I watched a long time ago. I think it came out last year. And it was about guys like Tesla and Einstein. And in their journals, they talk about how they would use hallucinogenics, and they would go into a state, and that Tesla openly said in his journal that a lot of what he knows about, as far as like the inventions that he had, he goes, it was given to him by a being. Yeah. Have you heard this?
Not about those two in particular, but I've heard it about many people, both modern and ancient. So all the stories, like if you watch Graham Hancock's Netflix series that came out a couple years ago, it's Apocalyptic or whatever it's called. And he writes about this in his books too. That's not just the Jews that are telling this story. The South Americans, when Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl come over, they're culture bringers. They're doing the exact same thing. The I forget what they're called. There's the Apkallu, the Sumerian Apkallu. There's like 8 culture bringers. They do the same thing. This is a worldwide phenomenon in the myths of all of the peoples, that you have these heavenly kinds of beings, angelic sorts of beings that the people end up worshiping, and they're the ones who taught them culture. So this is something we find everywhere.
Well, yeah,
and modern, like you said.
Yeah, even the concept of when it says of the roots, a lot of times you have to wonder, like, how would someone even figure out what a hallucinogenic is? I mean,
oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, some of them are just like, there's no way you could try this for 1,000 years and never get it.
No. No, not at all. So yeah, I can remember the first time that I saw that in Enoch, or someone may have mentioned it, and it was interesting because you don't think about how that's really early on in culture. I mean, we're only a couple hundred years in, and all of a sudden we're seeing some pretty big advancements that's going on there. And some people say, well, it's not in the Bible, so it didn't happen. I said, well, this is, again, we have to step back and say, yeah, maybe it didn't happen, but it really is flowing along with the story. It makes a lot of sense of what's happening. We're going to get into some stuff, probably not this week, but very soon, thinking about the concepts of who are the demons and how does this work. But just to go back to this point about what kind of terrified me about this show, what they were saying, this is how they concluded the show. Basically, that Tesla and Einstein and a couple other guys, can remember, they thought that there was a universal database that you could subconsciously tap into that kind of held all this knowledge. And they're wondering how we can tap into that. That's how they were advertising it. I was like, you do not want to tap into this. This is not good. It really
this is literally exactly what Jude is warning about. They left their position of authority. They crossed over. They're giving us knowledge from the other side. And then, divination is just the opposite of that. That's us crossing over to them.
That's right.
But actually, if Enoch is right, then they're teaching us the roots and the cutting of the roots and the plants. Like, they're tempting us almost to make it a two-way communicative street.
But that's what actually ends up happening, right? I mean,
it's exactly what ends up happening.